Imagine working a dead-end job, unseen by the world but carrying the weight of a powerful secret. A secret that could bring down the most powerful people in your city, and maybe even the country. Elijah Carter was just a street cleaner, but beneath the broom, he carried the truth that could unravel it all. Corruption, betrayal, and a system that's been built on lies for far too long. What happens when the world's darkest secrets are in your hands, and you're the only one brave enough to expose them? Welcome to The Ash Beneath the Marble, a story of resilience, courage, and the battle for justice in the face of overwhelming odds. This isn't just another crime story, this is the fight to take down an empire of lies. Stick with us because you won't want to miss a single twist in this thrilling tale of redemption, betrayal, and one man's quest to right the wrongs of his past. If you're ready to dive into the story and discover how Elijah's pursuit of justice unfolds, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories just like this. And don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell us what you think of Elijah's journey. Will he bring the truth to light, or will the powerful forces against him stop him before he can finish what he started? Now let's dive in. The story begins right now. The Ash Beneath the Marble follows the gripping journey of Elijah Carter, a former anti-corruption investigator who has retreated into a quiet life as a street cleaner in Michigan. Haunted by a false accusation that ruined his career, Elijah is determined to stay out of the spotlight. But when he begins to notice suspicious activities at the local government office, he can't ignore the signs of a deep-rooted corruption that stretches far beyond his city. As he quietly gathers evidence with the help of an old colleague and an unlikely ally, Elijah uncovers a massive conspiracy involving high-ranking officials, shady businesses, and criminal networks. But exposing the truth comes at a cost. He finds himself caught in a dangerous game of cat and mouse with those who will stop at nothing to protect their power. In a world where corruption is rampant and the stakes are deadly, Elijah must confront his past, risk everything he's worked to protect, and face a shadowy enemy who will do whatever it takes to silence him. Will his pursuit of justice be enough to bring down a corrupt empire, or will the truth be buried forever? This is a story of resilience, integrity, and the power of one person to ignite change no matter the cost. The Ash Beneath the Marble will keep you on the edge of your seat until the final moment. Disclaimer: the story you're about to watch is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual events, persons, or organizations is purely coincidental. This narrative is designed to entertain and provide valuable moral lessons, motivation, and inspiration. While the events in the story may seem real, they are crafted for educational and storytelling purposes, aiming to spark thought, reflection, and discussion. The views and actions depicted in this video do not represent the opinions or actions of any real individuals or entities. Viewer discretion is advised. The sun had not yet cracked over Lansing, but the city already stirred with its usual discontent. Trucks rumbled down the distant expressways, their groan blending with the occasional honk or hum of early risers. In the heart of Michigan's capital, the streets shimmered under the pale orange of artificial light, slick from a night of spring drizzle. Elijah Brooks arrived just before 5. He parked his battered Navy sedan 3 blocks away from the state government offices and walked the rest of the distance. His boots, cracked at the soles, splashed softly through shallow puddles as he passed darkened storefronts and shuttered cafes. On his back was a worn canvas bag. Slung from his shoulder was a collapsible broom and a dustpan rigged to fold shut. He carried them like a soldier might a weapon, well-practiced, well-worn, and always ready. Eli worked for the city as a sanitation technician, but that was just the label printed on his ID badge. In reality, he was the street cleaner for the Capitol complex. The official line was that he managed litter and debris around the perimeter of the state's highest offices. Trash blown in from traffic, cigarette butts dropped by aides in a hurry, flyers stapled to lampposts about union meetings no one ever attended. But in the 3 years he had held the post, Elijah had learned far more than just the rhythm of Lansing's street sweep. He had learned to listen. The broom in his hand wasn't just a tool, it was camouflage. No one looked twice at a man pushing a broom. Today began like any other. Elijah unlocked the small gray maintenance shed at the corner of Allegan and Capitol Avenue. Inside were bins of rock salt, bundles of replacement trash liners, and a rusted cart with wobbly wheels. He pulled on his reflective vest, clicked on the small radio clipped to his belt, and rolled the cart out into the street. At exactly 5:15, a silver SUV with tinted windows pulled into a reserved space behind the Senate office building. Elijah's eyes followed the vehicle just long enough to clock the plate. The same one from last Tuesday. It was unregistered with the state government fleet, and it never parked there during the day. Always early. always gone by sunrise. Elijah kept sweeping. He moved east, past the war memorial, past the flagpoles that whipped and snapped above empty sidewalks. There were no pedestrians yet. Just the clink of his broom against the curb. A chill breeze carried the scent of wet stone and city dust. By 5:40 he had reached the Northeast Plaza, where the granite steps led up to the Department of Infrastructure and Development. And that was where he found it. A flash of silver near the storm drain. He crouched casually, pretending to press his weight against a patch of gum welded into the concrete. But his eyes were on the object. Small. Rectangular. About the size of a thumb. A flash drive. No label. He palmed it, slid it into his vest, and moved on without breaking rhythm. From an upper window, a curtain twitched. By 7, the first employees began trickling in, coffee cups in hand, ID lanyards swinging. Elijah stood by the edge of the circular fountain at the plaza's center, emptying his dustpan into a black plastic bag. He nodded to one of the guards, who didn't bother to return the gesture. The man never did. Back in the shed, Elijah locked the door from the inside and removed his vest. He sat on the supply crate where he usually ate his sandwich and pulled a small, battered laptop from his bag. He did not connect it to the building's Wi-Fi. He used no Bluetooth. Everything was air-gapped, everything encrypted. The screen lit up in muted green against black. He inserted the drive. Most of the files were scrambled with meaningless names. But one folder caught his eye. It was simply called Site 17. He opened it. Blueprints. Audit records. Transfer logs. Dozens of payment authorizations directed to a single firm, DeMar & Sons Contracting. The name was familiar. Too familiar. Elijah had seen that name on his final case, the one that ended everything. The one where he had been made a scapegoat. The one that took his badge, his pension, and his career. He scrolled further. Buried among the files were photographs of excavation work, invoices for non-existent equipment, and signed approvals from names that still roamed the upper halls of power in Lansing. Some of those names had once called him a friend. Elijah leaned back against the metal wall of the shed. A drop of rain tapped against the roof. Then another. The wind picked up slightly, brushing leaves past the locked door. This was no coincidence. The drive had been left there, placed deliberately. But by whom? And why? More importantly, what exactly had he just uncovered? The laptop screen dimmed as he shut the lid. Outside, the city moved on, unaware. Elijah tied up the trash bag, rolled the cart back into its corner, and stepped into the rising light of a new day. He had come to Lansing to disappear. Now it seemed Lansing had other plans. Elijah sat on the edge of his bed that night, staring at the peeling wallpaper as the hum of his space heater filled the silence. The apartment was small but not cramped. Everything had its place. The single wooden chair tucked beneath the window, the bookshelf lined with battered crime novels and policy journals, the tiny kitchenette with exactly 2 mugs and 1 chipped plate. He kept it as he kept everything in his life now, simple, clean, untraceable. The flash drive sat beside his laptop on the nightstand, a reminder that the quiet life he had built might be unraveling. He turned the screen back on. There were 83 files in the Site 17 folder. He'd only looked at a handful. Now, one in particular caught his eye, an internal memo dated 4 months ago. It bore the letterhead of the Michigan Department of Infrastructure. It referenced Phase 3 funding clearance for Contract Group Alpha. Elijah opened it. The document wasn't addressed to any particular recipient. It was a draft and signed, likely never meant to be seen outside of internal circles. But its contents were damning. It referenced a misappropriation of funds redirected from a federal transportation grant. In short, money meant for bridge repairs and road safety had vanished, laundered through fake contracts, then funneled into accounts offshore. He recognized one of the account codes. It had belonged to a shell company he investigated 8 years ago, before everything collapsed. Before his name was dragged through the dirt. Eli exhaled through his nose, steady and slow. He wasn't sure if what he felt was anger, or the cold edge of something darker. This wasn't just familiar, it was the same scheme, expanded, perfected, untouched. He leaned forward and clicked on another file. A spreadsheet. Hidden in the numbers was a name. Paul Lennox. Elijah froze. Lennox had been his former colleague. A deputy investigator at the time, young, ambitious, and always a little too close to the political players. After Elijah's fall, Lennox had risen quickly. Now he was a senior ethics officer for the state. Ethics officer. The irony tasted bitter. Eli shut the laptop and stood. He moved to the window and peeled back the curtain just enough to see the parking lot below. His sedan sat in its usual spot. Across the street, a car he didn't recognize idled beneath a dead streetlight. He let the curtain fall and turned off the heater. That night he didn't sleep. By morning he was back in the shed, rolling his cart along Allegan Street. The breeze carried the smell of burnt coffee and cold metal. City life resumed its motion and Elijah resumed his. The Capitol complex always looked clean from the outside. Polished stone steps, trimmed hedges, crisp flags flapping against white columns. But beneath the marble and ceremony, rot festered. He could feel it in the way certain aides looked over their shoulders, in the late-night arrivals and whispered conversations behind closed doors, and in the way Lennox avoided the street entirely. Eli rounded the corner by the Department of Licensing and Regulation when a familiar face caught his eye. It was a woman, mid-30s, curly hair pinned back, messenger bag slung across her shoulder. She was standing outside the building with a tablet pressed to her chest, looking lost in thought. Maya Collins. He recognized her from a local publication, the Capitol Beacon. Young, investigative type. Wrote a series last year on mismanaged public housing funds. Sharp, relentless. A little reckless. Eli hesitated for just a second, then pushed his cart forward. As he passed her, he said nothing. But a folded slip of paper dropped from his glove, landing neatly beside her foot. She looked down, startled. By the time she picked it up, he was already crossing the plaza. The note was simple. Site 17. Ask about DeMar and Sons. That afternoon, Elijah returned to the apartment and reconnected the laptop. This time he copied the entire contents of the drive to a second flash. Then he ran a deep scan on the original. It was clean, no spyware, no hidden code. Whoever left it wanted him to have it. But not the whole world. Not yet. A knock at the door snapped him upright. He never got visitors. He moved silently to the side and peered through the peephole. No one. Another knock, softer this time, came from the back. His apartment had an alley exit, used mostly by trash collectors. Eli moved quietly, pulling open a drawer and reaching inside. He didn't own a gun anymore. But he did have the next best thing, an industrial flashlight with a steel core heavy enough to fracture bone. He crept through the kitchen and opened the rear door a sliver. A manila envelope lay on the ground. No sign of who had delivered it. He retrieved it, closed the door, locked both bolts. Inside the envelope was a single photo. It was him, Elijah Brooks, standing outside the Capitol fountain, broom in hand. The photo was taken from above, likely from a building window. On the back was a short sentence written in black ink. You're not invisible. That night, he placed the second flash drive in a false panel behind his bookshelf. Then he walked 3 blocks through the drizzle to a small diner with a 24-hour neon sign. He ordered coffee, no cream, and sat in the booth furthest from the windows. He didn't know if the message was a threat or a warning. But one thing was certain, someone knew who he was. And they were watching. The next morning, Lansing was cloaked in fog. The mist hung low across the Capitol lawn, muting the city's sharper edges and dulling the light that filtered through the sky. Elijah liked days like this. They quieted the noise and made people more cautious with their steps. It also made it easier for someone like him to move unnoticed. He walked with a purpose, broom tucked beneath his arm, the usual cart rolling gently behind him. The city's rhythm hadn't changed, but Elijah had. His mind ran calculations beneath his calm exterior, plotting connections, remembering faces, pulling threads. He needed answers. And he needed them soon. Maya Collins sat hunched at her desk in the Capitol Beacon's cramped third-floor office, staring at the note Elijah had dropped. She tried to make sense of it for hours, but without context. It felt like a riddle from a voice in the mist. Still, the name DeMar and Sons stirred something. She typed the phrase into her archive search. The Beacon's database was slow, built on grants and aging software. But it yielded results eventually, most of them boilerplate construction reports and public project bids. The firm had been awarded several multi-million-dollar contracts over the last decade, but none of the projects ever made front-page news. Pothole repairs, bridge retrofits, utility trenching. She cross-referenced those contracts with recent inspections. That's when she found it. A state-funded overpass project approved 3 years ago in Genesee County, budgeted at $15 million. But when she pulled the satellite images, the area hadn't changed. No signs of recent work. No visible repairs. In fact, the road itself had been closed indefinitely after a small mudslide. She leaned back in her chair. A $15 million ghost project. And the authorizing signature? Paul Lennox. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, then typed a message. Subject, DeMar and Sons. To Maya@capitalbeacon.org. Body, I think you're onto something. Be careful who you talk to. The message wasn't from her editor. It had no signature. No return address. Someone was already watching. Elijah stood across the street from the Capitol Annex, watching the main entrance. Workers filtered in and out. Most of them never looked up. He had seen Maya just once this morning, her expression tighter than usual. She didn't acknowledge him, but her steps had quickened when she passed. She had the scent now. And once she followed it, she'd start to understand the rot buried beneath the state's clean facade. But Elijah couldn't wait on journalism alone. He had to act. And that meant returning to the one place he had promised never to revisit. The archives. 10 years ago, Elijah Brooks was the lead investigator for the Office of State Integrity. His team was small, underfunded, but fiercely effective. For 4 years they cracked open fraud rings, exposed double-billing schemes, and unraveled a price-fixing scandal that brought down 2 senators. Then came the Fenton inquiry. A billion-dollar infrastructure package approved in record time with almost no oversight. Elijah followed a lead, discovered inflated budgets, backdated permits, and a list of phantom subcontractors. He compiled a report. The day before it went public, his apartment was raided. They found a burner phone, wired cash transfers, and a fake passport, all planted. Within 72 hours he was suspended, then charged with conspiracy and obstruction. The charges didn't stick, but the stain did. His badge was stripped. His clearance revoked. His career shattered. Elijah vanished into the noise, trading a suit for a vest, a desk for a broom. But he remembered where the evidence used to live. The basement of the Lansing Government Records Office smelled of mildew and forgotten stories. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elijah moved slowly past rows of metal shelves. The clerk hadn't even looked up when he flashed his old ID, the one marked with a false security clearance he had quietly renewed years ago using leftover access. He found the shelf he was looking for, case file 312F, the Fenton inquiry. He pulled the box. Inside were reprinted transcripts, meeting minutes, and file logs. But several documents were missing. Not redacted. Missing. He scanned the remaining records for familiar patterns. One memo, handwritten on the corner, mentioned interagency revisions pending, and a note to scrub all cross-funding lines involving Alpha. Alpha. The same word from the Site 17 memo. They had erased the funding trail. But not everything. A log from a former staffer included a request for access to a project near the Detroit River, codenamed Iron Basin. Elijah paused. Iron Basin had been proposed, then killed in committee nearly 9 years ago. A hypothetical dam project, never approved. No budget, no land acquired. Or so they said. Yet here it was, linked to contracts and site assessments. Elijah knew then. The ghost projects weren't just about stealing money. They were cover operations, hidden beneath paper trails and phantom companies. And they were still active. He packed the file and returned it to the shelf, heart pounding. He had seen enough to know what came next. That night, Elijah found another envelope slipped beneath his door. This one was thinner. Inside, a single typed line. They think you're staying quiet. Don't disappoint. No signature. No return address. Someone was helping him. Someone inside. But for how long? The old records office had left Elijah with more questions than answers, but it also gave him direction. Iron Basin. Site 17. Alpha. These weren't just financial crimes. They were infrastructure-level schemes, built deep, funded high, and protected by silence. And now, someone wanted him back in the fight. The city's heartbeat felt different that day. The breeze carried a quiet tension, as if Lansing itself held its breath. Elijah rolled his cart down the sidewalk like he did every morning, but his eyes were sharper. Every face was a potential watcher. Every shadow held weight. Maya Collins had published nothing. He expected that. Real journalism didn't move overnight. But when he passed her building just before lunch, he saw her in the window. She was pacing. Good. That meant she had found something. Inside the Capitol Beacon, Maya's desk looked like a war zone. Printouts scattered across every surface. Sticky notes on her monitor. A corkboard behind her pinned with strings, circles, arrows. The phrase Iron Basin sat in the center, circled in red. She'd uncovered the proposal buried deep in an archived legislative budget appendix. It had been written up under Emergency Water Flow Regulation Projects, but defunded before hearings. The proposal vanished, but the paper trail hadn't. With a little digging, Maya found something strange. 2 years after its official cancellation, land was quietly purchased along the Detroit River by a shell company, Holt Holdings. On paper, the company was tied to a private investment group based in Toronto. But the registered agent in Michigan? DeMar and Sons. That afternoon, Elijah sat on a bench behind the Department of Transportation, sipping coffee from a paper cup. He wasn't supposed to be there. His shift ended an hour ago. But he needed to see someone. He spotted him near the loading dock. Tall, built like a linebacker, wearing a maintenance badge over his blue vest. Freddie Kane. They hadn't spoken in over a year. Elijah tossed the empty cup and walked over, quiet and measured. "Kane," he said flatly. Freddie turned, surprise flashing across his face before it was replaced by something harder. "Brooks, you got some nerve. I wouldn't come if I didn't have a reason." "You always got reasons," Freddie muttered, glancing around before jerking his head toward the back. "Come on." They moved behind a utility shed, shielded from the cameras. "I need access," Elijah said. "To the contractor logs. State-level, post-approval edits." Freddie scowled. "You're still chasing ghosts?" "They're not ghosts. They're live contracts. Funded under dead names." Freddie rubbed his jaw. "I still got a kid in college, Brooks. You drag me in and someone decides I knew too much." "They already think you do," Elijah cut in. "Your name's on the rotation list for Site 17. Freddie's eyes widened. "Bull. I've seen the records." A beat of silence passed. Then Freddie sighed, pulling a small notepad from his vest. He scribbled an address and handed it over. "You didn't get this from me," he said. "Building doesn't exist on city maps. Leased under a traffic logistics shell. But that's where the files are routed." Elijah nodded. "Appreciate it." As he turned to leave, Freddie called after him. "You ever wonder why they let you walk free back then? After all that?" Elijah paused but didn't look back. Every day. That evening, Elijah drove to the address. It led him to a low building wedged between two industrial lots on the city's edge. No signs. No logos. Just a rusted chain-link fence and a blinking security light. He parked down the block and approached on foot, pulling the city-issued trash bag from his cart to mask his purpose. The front door was locked. No surprise. But around the side, a loading dock had been propped slightly ajar. Just wide enough for a man who knew how to move like a ghost. Inside, rows of filing cabinets stretched the length of the warehouse. Metal desks, rolling chairs, unplugged monitors. It looked abandoned, but it wasn't. A fresh cup of coffee steamed near one terminal. Elijah moved fast, scanning labels. Most were project logs, coded titles and budget entries. But toward the back, beneath a plastic tarp, he found a crate marked IRBOPS. Inside were blueprints. Iron Basin. Revised. The project had been reactivated 2 years ago, repackaged under disaster relief infrastructure. The federal funds were real. The contractors were not. The final page listed project executives. Paul Lennox. And beneath him, a name Elijah hadn't seen in years. Avery Stokes. His former boss. The same man who testified against him. Elijah's pulse slowed to a dangerous calm. It wasn't just that corruption had survived after his fall. It had evolved. And the people behind it were the same ones who buried him. Outside, as he slipped back into the fog, Elijah didn't notice the camera on the nearby utility pole swivel ever so slightly in his direction. But the operator did. And 30 seconds later, a phone buzzed in an office with blacked-out windows and no name on the door. The voice that answered was low and smooth. "Yeah." The caller spoke only 3 words. He found it. Elijah moved through the night like it belonged to him. Lansing's lights blurred behind him as he crossed into the city's industrial district. His cart was gone, replaced by a dark windbreaker and a fireproof satchel strapped to his chest. He was no longer the quiet janitor with a bent broom and a bowed head. He was what they had tried to bury. And now he was coming back up through the dirt. Maya Collins knew she was being followed. She felt it in the rhythm of the footsteps behind her. Always just a second too steady. The same black sedan parked down the block when she left for groceries. The strange pause on the phone line when she called her sister in Ann Arbor. But she wasn't afraid. Not really. Something deeper than fear had taken root inside her. A hunger for the truth. That was the danger of people like her. Once they saw the crack in the wall, they couldn't stop peeling. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number, you're running out of time. Site 17 has a backdoor. Look beneath the holding tanks. Use caution." It was the second anonymous tip in as many days. She replied with a single word. "Who?" No answer. Elijah didn't go home. He hadn't for 3 nights. He kept to a room above a defunct printing shop owned by an old friend, someone who owed him more than a favor. The place smelled of ink and dust, but it was quiet, untraceable. He laid out the blueprints on a folding table. The Iron Basin revisions were more than misappropriated funds. They were a blueprint for a covert operation cloaked in disaster mitigation. He studied the lines near the Detroit River, marked with innocuous codes. But he saw through them. They weren't building a dam. They were building a diversion. A concealed route, likely for waste or something worse, designed to reroute accountability. If anything went wrong downstream, blame would fall on weather patterns, not mismanagement. Or sabotage. The funding had come from three sources: state infrastructure relief, private logistics partnerships, and a mysterious line item listed under DFPQ-24, a designation Elijah recognized. It was reserved for emergency federal defense contracts. Why would a state water project need military clearance? Unless it wasn't about water at all. Meanwhile, across town, Maya pulled up to the Site 17 location listed in her notes. She parked near the chain-link fence and watched. Trucks came and went, but there were no logos. No permits displayed. The facility didn't look like it belonged to the Department of Transportation. It looked like it belonged to no one. She waited until dark before she made her move. Crawling under the fence, careful to avoid the cameras she had already mapped from across the street, she slipped into the loading bay through a vent that had been left unscrewed. The inside was colder than she expected. Quiet, too quiet for an active project site. She moved past shipping containers and modular walls, descending 2 metal staircases into what looked like a water regulation room. Only there was no water. No pumps. No filtration system. Just 2 thick doors. And a keypad. She didn't try it. She knew better. She took photos, fast, precise, and moved back the way she came. She was almost at the vent when she heard footsteps. Boots. Multiple. She pressed herself into the shadows, heart hammering. The voices were muffled, but one came clearer than the rest. "We've got movement near Corridor 3. No ID badge logged." Another voice. "Come. Detached. Do not engage. Let the system do its job." Maya crawled out seconds later, throat dry, lungs tight. They hadn't seen her. But something else had. Elijah stared at the name on the blueprint again. Avery Stokes. He could still hear his voice in the courtroom, the way he said, Elijah overstepped protocol, like he wasn't just following orders. Like he hadn't been the one who gave them. Now Stokes was back. Still standing. Still climbing. And Elijah, the man who once brought down the wolves, had been forced to wear their leash. Until now. He lit a match and dropped it into a steel trash can, watching one of the blueprint copies curl and blacken inside. He wasn't going to send reports anymore. He wasn't going to whisper. This time he would burn the truth into the city's walls. At the governor's residence, Paul Lennox poured himself a glass of imported bourbon. He stood in front of the wide office windows, overlooking the sleeping city. Behind him, a man in a suit adjusted his cufflinks. "He's awake," the man said. Lennox didn't flinch. "He never really slept," he muttered. "What about the girl?" "She's not the problem," the man replied. "Yet." Lennox turned. His eyes were ice. "Then make sure she never becomes one." The man gave a slight nod and walked out the back. Elijah sat at a bus stop long after midnight, wrapped in silence, surrounded by paper coffee cups and cracked concrete. He wasn't planning anymore. He was preparing. The machine had forgotten him. Grown arrogant in his absence. And like all arrogant things, it had gotten sloppy. The fire was already lit. Now it was just a matter of where to strike first. The city looked different from the roof of the Carlton parking deck. To most, it was just another grid of lights, buildings, motion. But to Elijah it was a battlefield. Not made of guns and smoke, but silence, signatures, and falsified numbers. He stood near the edge, a printed satellite image in one hand, the wind pulling at the corners. The overlay Maya had given him earlier that day confirmed what he feared. Site 17 wasn't the only location. There were more. 9 total. Each site linked by a pattern buried deep in state development plans, masked under terms like resilience, restructuring, and renewal. He traced them on the page with a red pen. Together, they formed a crescent that followed the Detroit River, all the way to the shore of Lake Erie. Not a random pattern. A route. Something was moving through them. Or would move. Water? No. The elevations didn't support that. Chemicals? Waste? Possible. But why the military tie-in? He needed proof. Real proof. And there was only one person who could help him access it. Carmen Vega hadn't spoken to Elijah in nearly 4 years. Not since the trial. Not since she looked at him from the witness box and said the one word that helped seal his fate. Unverified. That was all she had said. Not a lie. Not the truth. Just a word that bought her survival. She worked now as a data analyst for the State Risk Management Office. Her access badge was platinum. She saw everything: covert incident reports, pending disasters, and red flag anomalies most departments didn't even know existed. When he called, she hung up the first time. The second time she listened. They met behind a decommissioned train station outside Flint. A place they used to visit during raids. Places where no one watched anymore. Elijah, she said, arms folded tight. Why now? Because it's happening again. She didn't ask what. She knew. I can't crack it without you, he said. They used the old systems. Same infrastructure, new names. I need risk anomaly data for the last 6 months. Anything tagged above level 4. She hesitated. If they trace me, they won't. I'll never see the raw files. Just show me the patterns. She studied his face. Her voice softened, but not with kindness. You really want to do this? After what they did to you? He held her gaze. That's why I have to do it. Later that night, Carmen sat in a dim room lit only by the blue of her screen. She bypassed 3 security walls. Found the files. There were 17 flagged incidents over the last 6 months, all labeled as structural weaknesses due to flooding. But the flood zones, they didn't match the locations. And the structural weaknesses? They were man-made. Tunnel collapses. Pressure inconsistencies. Sudden underground voids. A pattern emerged. The exact crescent Elijah had drawn. She sent the heat map to a burner inbox under the alias Calder Black. Then she wiped her presence clean. Elijah opened the file in a rented library computer. The map that glowed on the screen confirmed everything. These weren't natural incidents. They were tests. Small-scale structural failures disguised as weather damage. Site preparation. Sabotage. This wasn't just corruption anymore. This was threat architecture. And someone was paying for it. At the bottom of the page was a signature authorization. Not Stokes. Not Lennox. Lennox, the governor's daughter. Publicly, Dana Lennox was a philanthropist. Quiet. No government position. No corporate affiliations. But here, in the digital shadows, she was project director for DFPQ-24. It was a family operation. And they had no idea who they'd let survive. Maya sat in her apartment with a wall full of strings and pins, staring at the same map. She had received the file too. No name. Just the subject line. They're digging through the state. She wasn't sure who sent it. But she knew it wasn't Elijah. He didn't send files. He sent fire. That same night, Elijah slipped into the archive room beneath the Capitol building. The tunnels beneath Lansing were vast and mostly unused, except for utilities and storage. He moved like memory. In the deepest vault, behind a row of locked cabinets, he found the blueprint for Iron Basin. Original. Pre-revision. It wasn't just a water project. It was originally drafted as a supply diversion system in case of chemical attack. The new version? It was a delivery system. Weaponized flow redirection. If activated, it could channel toxic materials from industrial zones directly into residential water systems under the guise of emergency overflow. And it had already been tested. On a quiet street, in a surveillance truck disguised as a plumbing van, the operator adjusted his headset. Subject has accessed level 7 vault, he said. Pulling up footage now. A second voice replied over the comms. No more watching. Prep containment. On it. Asset 0 is moving into play. Elijah left the vault and walked up the corridor. He didn't notice the absence of noise until it was too late. The air felt off, and then he saw it. At the far end of the hall, a man stood in the shadows. So, unmoving. Face blurred beneath a black ball cap and a coat with no logo. Elijah slowed. The man didn't speak. Didn't move. Then, with a subtle turn, he walked into the darkness. Not away, but toward the exit, leaving a message with every step. They knew. They were ready. The noose was tightening. And Elijah? He was finally smiling. Because the closer the fire came, the more paper there was to burn. The Capitol building loomed against the dawn like a cathedral of deceit. Marble and glass, polished for cameras and tours, but underneath, beneath the layers of polished stone and memorial plaques, there was rot. Elijah had walked those halls before. He once believed in their purpose. He once believed he could fix the system from within. Now he knew better. He wasn't here to fix it. He was here to bring the whole thing down. Governor Paul Lennox sat alone in his private office as the morning light crept in. The surveillance reports were stacked on his desk. Printed, not digital. Always printed. He never trusted the cloud. The latest report was brief. Subject D breached vault level 7. Extraction failed. Tracking device compromised. He closed the folder. Sighed. Clean it up, he said aloud, knowing the room was already listening. A quiet click acknowledged the order. Back in the old printing loft, Elijah spread out Carmen's map next to the original iron basin plans. He circled 3 points in thick black ink, intersections where old city tunnels met revised basin overflow valves. The perfect spots for insertion. Or contamination. He didn't just have a story now. He had a weapon. A single act could prove the system's existence. He would expose the ghost network they'd buried beneath years of bureaucracy. But he needed Maya. And he needed her to trust him completely. Maya met Elijah at a diner on the edge of downtown. She wore a blue hoodie and a Detroit Tigers cap pulled low. He had shaved his beard and now wore wireframe glasses that made him look like a librarian rather than a legend. They sat in a corner booth, untouched pancakes between them. I got the map, she said. What I don't get is the endgame. Elijah looked at her, his voice a low murmur. They're going to simulate a flood event. Use the emergency system to divert flow. But it won't be flood water they're moving. Maya blinked. So, chemicals? He nodded. Not just any. There's a stockpile from the old Delcor plant. Buried under Site 3. Obsolete nerve agents marked for disposal but never moved. It's still there. Maya's stomach turned. That's in Highland Park. Residential. He placed a flash drive on the table. It's all on here. But no one will publish it unless we force it into the light. Meaning? We trigger the system ourselves. But in reverse. A safe test. A dry run leak into a controlled zone. Enough to prove the connection without endangering anyone. Then we blow the whistle live before they can spin it. Maya looked at the drive. Then at him. If we do this, she said, we're going to war. No, Elijah replied. We're ending one. That night, the old tunnels beneath Lansing came alive. Elijah and Maya moved under cover of rain. The city above was quiet, its people unaware of the poison being threaded beneath their feet like veins waiting to burst. They reached the first junction. Elijah pulled back the rusted hatch to reveal a pressure valve, aged and untouched. Here's where we reroute, he said. Only for a minute. Long enough to show the pressure spike on public monitors. And if they notice? Maya asked. They will. But we'll already be done. They worked fast. Maya logged into a municipal stream node through her laptop, rerouting camera access to fake maintenance notices. Elijah rotated the valve. The pressure dial ticked up. Then a sound. Boots. Too many. Elijah yanked Maya back just as the first flash grenade bounced into the corridor. A crack of light. Then pain. When Maya came to, they were in a black van. Her wrists were zip-tied. Elijah sat across from her, blood trailing down his cheek. A man sat between them. Clean suit. Expression carved from stone. You made a lot of noise tonight, he said. The kind that gets people buried in sealed files. Maya narrowed her eyes. Then you should have sealed them better. The man smirked. You think exposing this will change anything? You're two ghosts chasing a firestorm. Elijah met his gaze. Then we'll burn louder than your silence. The van swerved suddenly. Tires popped. Smoke. The rear doors blew open as Maya and Elijah were yanked into the dark by masked figures. Everything happened in seconds. They ran. Sirens split the night. And for the first time, the machine had to chase them. Carmen sat in her office, the lights dimmed. Her terminal showed a blinking red signal. Public access node activated. She leaned forward, typing in a code. The system bled open. Live feeds. Sensor anomalies. Names. Coordinates. She clicked send. A data storm surged into every news desk, watchdog site, and public forum in Michigan. Everything was out now. All of it. No more whispers. At 4:19 a.m., the Michigan Department of Emergency Management issued a statement denying rumors of covert infrastructure redirection. At 4:41 a.m., a citizen science group posted independent verification of tunnel pressure spikes near Highland Park. At 5:03 a.m., someone leaked the governor's internal emails. The state map turned red. But Elijah wasn't done. He wasn't hiding anymore. And there was still one door left to open. Elijah and Maya walked through the chaos like shadows moving across the skin of a broken world. The city had woken up to the storm. News outlets screamed about rogue state projects, faulty flood control systems, and the possible deployment of dangerous chemicals into residential areas. There was no denying it now. The people were watching. The machine was exposed and the gears were grinding to a halt. But they still weren't safe. Governor Paul Lennox stood before the emergency board, his hand trembling slightly as he read through the latest reports. The room was cold, too cold for a conference, and the faces around him weren't offering comfort. They were offering consequences. "Contain this," he said, his voice like ice. "We've lost control of the narrative. Shut down the leaks. Neutralize them." His eyes narrowed as he flipped to the last page. "Who else is involved in this?" A man at the table cleared his throat. "We have her," he said. "Maya Collins. And we have a list of contacts. It's all under control." Lennox looked up. His gaze was dead. "I don't want control. I want them gone." Elijah and Maya moved quickly. They knew every second mattered now. Every corner they turned, every shadow they crossed could be their last. "We need to find Carmen," Maya said, her voice urgent. "She sent the data. We don't have time to track it all ourselves." Elijah nodded. His jaw was tight, the burn of the last few days sinking deep into his bones. But there was no time for weariness. No time to question his choices. He had made this decision a long time ago. They didn't speak much after that. They didn't have to. Carmen was waiting for them in a small, nondescript motel room on the outskirts of Lansing. She hadn't answered her phone. She hadn't answered any of Elijah's encrypted messages. But when they walked in, she was already standing by the window, staring out at the endless stretch of dark highway. "I didn't think you'd come back," she said, her voice a little too calm. Elijah didn't answer. He didn't need to. He simply moved to the table where a stack of documents sat, waiting. The flash drive he had left her, the one with all the encrypted files from the Capitol, had been copied. And now it was spread before them. Every connection, every scheme, every name. The pieces of the puzzle were finally visible. Maya walked up behind him and looked down at the data, her fingers brushing over the files with an almost reverent touch. "Everything's here," she said. "All of it." Carmen turned from the window, her eyes sharp now. "Not everything. There's still one more thing," she said quietly. "Lennox isn't just the governor. He's connected to something bigger. A network that spans more than just Michigan." Elijah's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Carmen's lips pressed together in a thin line. "The system you've exposed, it's not just about chemicals. It's about control. They've been using government infrastructure to funnel resources, black market resources, into international networks. It's organized, and it's global." Maya shook her head, disbelief mingling with anger. "You're telling me this isn't just a state issue?" "No," Carmen said. "It's much bigger. And if we stop them here, we stop them everywhere." Elijah stood, his eyes hard. "Then we burn it all down." They knew what they had to do. They had the proof, the hard data, the secret contracts, the global ties. But what they didn't have was time. The moment they hit send, the storm would come crashing down. And the people responsible would fight back with everything they had. But as they moved to make their final preparations, Elijah had no illusions about what was coming. The system was too far-reaching, too well-oiled to crumble easily. It would take something louder than just a leak. It would take an act. And the only way to show the world the truth was to drag it out into the light, regardless of what it cost. At 3:46 a.m., a notification pinged across the screens of every major news outlet in Michigan. And then across the nation. A video. It was blurry at first. Unsteady, like it had been taken in a hurry. But as the footage cleared, the truth became impossible to deny. Elijah stood before a crowd of anonymous figures, a pile of documents burning in a steel barrel behind him. The words came quickly, but they were sharp. Each syllable was a hammer striking the foundation. "Governors, senators, CEOs, you've all had your day in the sun," Elijah's voice rang out. "But now the world will know who you are, what you've been hiding, who you've been killing." He paused, his face a mask of grim resolve. "This is the end of your empire. It burns with every word." The camera panned to show a series of encrypted files, bank transfers, military contracts, chemical distributions, spreading across the screen. "And if this is what it takes to save the people you've tried to erase, so be it." He turned, watching the papers as they caught fire. And when the last of the documents was reduced to ash, the camera cut. The message had been delivered. The morning after, Lansing was a city changed. People lined up to watch the news reports, shocked, horrified, but awakened. The corruption was no longer an unseen hand. It was a beast laid bare before them. But not everyone was content to let it rest. Governor Lennox watched from his office as the world tore itself apart. The truth had been released, but it had consequences, ones he wasn't ready to face. He slammed the report onto his desk, his breath shallow. He hadn't prepared for this. None of them had. Behind him, a voice spoke, cold and controlled. "We've contained the leaks, sir. But the damage is done." Lennox turned. His expression was broken, his mask slipping. "This isn't over," he muttered. "It's just beginning." Elijah and Maya walked away from the fire, their silhouettes swallowed by the rising sun. They had done what they set out to do, but the cost was still ahead. The machine would keep turning, its gears turning ever faster. But now, for the first time in years, Elijah felt something stir deep inside. Hope. The kind of hope that comes when you've seen the truth, felt the weight of it, and know that, for once, it might be enough. And in the distance, as the ashes of their work scattered through the wind, it was clear. The world would never be the same again. Here are 7 moral lessons that can be drawn from the ash beneath the marble. 1. The power of individual action in the face of corruption. The protagonist, Elijah, begins as a humble street cleaner, an ordinary man on the surface. However, his past as an anti-corruption investigator and his refusal to ignore the wrongs around him reveal an important lesson. Individual action, no matter how small or quiet, has the power to challenge systems of corruption. While most people would look away from the issues plaguing the system, Elijah chooses to take a stand. His actions show that it only takes one person with determination and courage to expose the truth. Moral lesson: you don't need power or a title to make a difference. The smallest act of defiance can lead to monumental change, especially when driven by a sense of justice. 2. The cost of silence. Throughout the story, Elijah witnesses the unrelenting cycle of corruption, where many remain silent out of fear or apathy. The people around him, whether government officials or the general public, have been conditioned to accept the system's evils or turn a blind eye. However, the price of silence is enormous. It allows corruption to thrive, and without confrontation, injustice can become systemic. Elijah's eventual decision to expose the truth highlights that silence in the face of wrongdoing often contributes to the perpetuation of injustice. Moral lesson: silence is not always a neutral choice. It can be an enabler of corruption and oppression. Standing up to wrongdoing, no matter the cost, is often the only way to stop it. 3. The importance of integrity over personal gain. Elijah was once an esteemed anti-corruption investigator, but he was falsely accused and destroyed by those in power. He could have chosen to walk away completely, to live quietly in the shadows. But when confronted with an opportunity to right the wrongs of the past, he chooses to put the greater good above personal safety or reputation. His willingness to sacrifice his quiet life for a greater cause speaks to the value of integrity and conviction over personal gain. Moral lesson: true integrity requires standing by one's values even when it costs personal comfort, safety, or even reputation. The pursuit of what is right often requires selflessness. 4. The power of collaboration in overcoming adversity. Though Elijah starts as an isolated figure, his journey highlights the power of collaboration. It is only through his partnership with Maya and Carmen that he can collect the evidence, strategize, and expose the corruption. Together, they form a team united by a shared purpose. Each person brings a unique strength to the table, showing that it's not just one person, but the support of others that enables success in difficult battles. Moral lesson: collaboration amplifies strength. When people unite for a common cause, they become unstoppable, even against powerful opposition. 5. The consequences of power without accountability. Governor Lennox and the corrupt officials symbolize a powerful system that thrives on secrecy and unaccountability. Throughout the story, they use their power to manipulate systems, divert resources, and hide crimes, believing they are untouchable. However, the eventual exposure of their actions shows the inherent flaws in a system that operates without transparency. When power is left unchecked, it will inevitably lead to corruption and exploitation. But accountability, no matter how delayed, has the potential to dismantle even the strongest of structures. Moral lesson: power, when unchecked by accountability, leads to corruption. Transparency and justice are essential in preventing the abuse of power. 6. The cost of reaching for justice. Elijah, Maya, and Carmen all sacrifice personal comfort, safety, and even their lives to expose the truth. The road to justice is not easy. It is often paved with risks, challenges, and losses. The trio faces obstacles, danger, and betrayal, yet they remain steadfast in their pursuit of justice. The story highlights that the path to righting wrongs often involves difficult choices and painful consequences, but it's a path worth taking. Moral lesson: the pursuit of justice is not without its sacrifices. Often, those who fight for truth must endure hardship and face great personal risk. But the rewards of justice are worth the cost. 7. Hope and change are always possible, even in the darkest moments. At the story's climax, Elijah reflects on the hope that stirs within him. It's a quiet, yet powerful sentiment. Change, even when it seems impossible, is always possible if people are willing to fight for it. Despite the overwhelming odds, Elijah refuses to give up. He believes that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will eventually surface. The ending underscores the idea that even in a world that feels hopeless, small acts of courage, honesty, and integrity can ignite a spark that leads to systemic change. Moral lesson: no matter how dark or corrupt the world may seem, hope and change are always within reach. Through collective effort and determination, even the most entrenched systems of power can be overthrown. These 7 lessons collectively highlight the power of individual actions, the consequences of silence, the importance of integrity and accountability, the strength of collaboration, and the enduring hope for change in a world marred by corruption. They are timeless reminders that no matter how hard the battle may seem, the pursuit of truth and justice is always worth the effort. Thank you for watching and being part of the ash beneath the marble. We hope you found Elijah's journey as compelling and inspiring as we did. His courage, integrity, and determination to fight for justice remind us all that even the smallest act can create a ripple effect for change. If you enjoyed this story and the lessons it offers, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest content. We've got more thrilling, thought-provoking stories coming your way, each one designed to inspire and motivate you on your own journey. And if you'd like to share your thoughts or tell us what you learned from today's story, leave a comment down below. We love hearing from you. Thank you again for your time and support. Be sure to check out our other videos for more incredible stories that challenge, inspire, and entertain. Until next time, keep pushing forward. Your story is waiting to be told.